Welcome back to episode number 14 of Mr. Hayden's Ag Lessons. I'm your host, Mr. Hayden, and today we're talking about ag business. Welcome back, crew. Hope you're having a great week this week. A little warmer temperatures, but kind of a dip here the next couple days. So stay in that quarantine and continue your social distancing. Today we're going to be talking about ag business, which I know a lot of you think right off the bat, man, Mr. Hayden, I hate talking about anything financial. Well, part of that is you don't like change in your life, so you hate all your quarters, nickels, pennies, things like that. But today we're going to talk about the basic products and services in agriculture, why you buy certain things, and you could relate this to anything in your life, to be honest. So the first thing is agricultural business deals with the processing, marketing, and the change of raw commodities. And we learned earlier that a raw commodity could be anything like corn, wheat, rice, sugarcane, could be cattle, pork, chickens, lamb. Those are all raw commodities, and we have to change or make changes to those for them to be available at the retail level as you as a consumer. And so most agricultural businesses either offer a product, a service, or a combination of both. And today we're going to focus mainly on the product part of it. And so, like we said, our raw commodity producers, our agricultural farmers, if you will, they produce a commodity, which is a uniform product, meaning they are a price taker. Someone who produces a bushel of corn, number 2 yellow dent corn, there's nothing very special about that product. It is a uniform product that is mass produced in the United States. A price maker would be someone who maybe has some type of value added agriculture where they can demand a higher price for their product because of a certain characteristic. So when we think about agriculture, think about it is the basis of our entire food supply. Without agriculture, civilization cannot go on as we know it. So agriculture is essential to all countries around the world. We have gotten extremely good at agriculture, meaning the amount of our population involved in production agriculture is right around 2%, which is extremely small when you think about it only takes 2 of 100 people in our civilization to feed the other 98. So agriculture, over time, we've invested in technology. Economies of scale is a term you might hear in agriculture, and what that means is we've seen a lot of the farm size in Iowa and throughout the Midwest, all over the United States. It has got increasingly larger in size, or for your livestock producer, the number of head produced per livestock producer has also jumped dramatically, okay? And part of that reason is a basic economic principle with, like I said, economies of scale, where they can take the costs of production and they divide it out over a larger quantity of products sold. So if I'm a farmer and I farm 10,000 acres compared to a farmer that maybe farms 1,000 acres, I can afford to have the technology, the latest equipment, maybe invest in other equipment that 1,000-acre farmer is unable to do. Same thing with our livestock production there. And so efficiency is a great thing, but sometimes what that leads to is very small margins for price, or I should say money to be made in agriculture. And a lot of the things that impact agriculture are out of producers' control. So some of those things might be weather. The big thing right now is this global pandemic, something that's totally out of the agricultural producers' control, but is going to influence the bottom dollar of many agricultural producers here in the next weeks, months, and even to the next year, okay? And so when we think about agriculture, we think about supply and demand. So I know you guys love lines. You're very artistic. You love this, but this might be the type of drawing that a lot of you get fearful of. But there's nothing scary about this. Supply and demand drives every buying and selling decision that you've ever had in your life. And this is a basic supply and demand. I'm just going to make it up, and I'm going to say this is for a loaf of bread at the grocery store. What this says is at $2, there will be 100 loaves of bread, and that is the price equilibrium. What that means is at a $2 price, 100 loaves of bread will be demanded, and 100 will also be supplied right there, okay? So the example here is we've had a lot of increase in demand for bread and some of those products. So they haven't really raised the price, but what that results in is we see a higher amount of bread that would be consumed by the consumer there. So when we think about supply and demand curves, remember demand curve, that just shows you how much of an item someone is willing to buy at a given price. A supply curve is how much a company is willing to produce and supply to the market at a certain price level. And that really drives all our agricultural commodities, also our retail dollar that we spend at the grocery store there. And then another thing that when you think about our agricultural food chain, what that means, our retail food chain is a lot of these products that we're seeing on the grocery store shelves that are flying off the shelves really quickly, our agricultural production, a lot of the final products, like a lot of our meat products, they're on a 1 to 2 to 3 day window from the time they're slaughtered to the time they're there for you to buy at the supermarket. So we don't have this huge quantity of meat, retail meat products that are just waiting to hit the grocery store shelves. They have to be butchered in a timely manner. And that's all about like I said, the very small margins in livestock and crop production. The more you have to store a product, the more that it costs. Also, the more that sometimes the quality of that product can decrease over time. And hey, a fun fact you might not know about Mr. Hayden, I actually have an undergrad in ag business from Iowa State. Big thank you to Dr. Ron Diner in the ag business department. Really excellent professor there at Iowa State. Some of you might be thinking about getting into the banking career. If you're thinking about maybe being a teller, that's the type of change you need in your life, right? And so when we're thinking about our retail food chain, there's some products that have a high level of perishability, anything from bread, milk, other products that are going to, the shelf life is not very long. And those items you might notice, you might say, well, Mr. Hayden, a loaf of bread is not very expensive compared to other products. Well, how many steps did it take to get that raw commodity of wheat into a finished loaf of bread? And a lot of our manufacturing of ag products has gotten extremely efficient as well. Not a lot of human man hours in terms, a lot of it's done by machines. And that really helps us to have a low cost food supply, which is high. The average American spends about 10% of their disposable income on food in the United States, which that is very low compared to other countries of the world. It's always said that a high food cost is pretty much like a tax on everyone because we all need to eat. We all need agricultural products there. And so the other term you might hear about sometimes is vertical integration. And what that means is you might have a livestock producer where they actually, let's do pork, for example, they'll actually farrow out the piglets. They'll have those offspring that they'll raise to a market, a slaughter weight. And then what they'll do is the very last step is they might own that pig all the way from birth all the way to finishing weight, and then they might sell it to a packing plant. And right now you might be hearing about some packing plants that are making some very large margins. And part of that is the large amount of supply we have right now, because a lot of the dining out, we're not eating at restaurants right now, so there's a huge backup of products that have not been consumed. When we see that supply a balloon, the price of those products, those packing plants, they really have a lot of control over that. So not the best on the producer side of things. Hopefully we can figure some things out that will help our food supply in the future. But that vertical integration, like I said, the producer owns the product longer throughout. They might do some of the actual processing steps. If they get it all the way to the retail consumer, if they do 100% of that, then they get 100% of that retail dollar. But an average product at the grocery store, if you buy a dollar box of pasta, the farmer that produces the wheat that goes into that pasta, they might only see 5 to 7 cents of that, depending on the product. A good example of a product that doesn't take much processing would be eggs. And like we said, Iowa is the #1 leading producer of eggs in the United States. The main processing part of eggs is just washing them, grading them, which the USDA, they do that, and then the packaging and transportation of them to the grocery stores. And so when we think about production of agriculture, both livestock and crops, it does take a large amount of capital to start farming. Land is fairly expensive, especially in Iowa. It might range anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 to $14,000 an acre. Land is a set commodity, meaning that we're not making new land. It's something that'll always have some type of value. That value obviously fluctuates based on the return that you can get on that land. But also with our livestock producers, you might see them invest in $1 million buildings for raising anything from pork, chicken to our cattle. So there's a lot of investment in agriculture, and it's not very easy in the agricultural world when the price gets low to just shut off production. When you have an animal that's going through its life, you can't just say, hey, I'm not going to produce pigs. There is our first sump pump of the day. That might be a record for the longest into our episode. We're going to hear from Northeast Security Bank. A human's greatest fear is being alone, but eventually you're going to need a loan for all your home, auto, and farm needs. It has, when we think about agriculture also, some of the things that you might not think about, every time you go to the grocery store, whatever you buy, you're voting with your dollar. So if you buy something in that type of product, you're voting for that product. And by producing, or I should say by buying that product, that tells that producer that they have demand for their product. And so think about that when you see a lot of value added products, maybe something made here locally in Iowa, please help support those businesses. Another sump pump commercial that we're probably not going to get to due to the lack of rain, but I got Mark's Locker in Raleigh. Let Mark meet the needs of your local family needs. And so he would be an example of value added where he has a product where he might buy carcasses, animals from a certain producer. He'll harvest them, he'll cut up the carcasses into different prices of different cuts of meat, and then you buy it directly from Mark. So an example of the value added there. So I know there's a lot of financial talk, a lot of business sides of things, but when you think about why we buy our food, how we buy it, and why it is so inexpensive, think about those things and make sure you think about those farmers, those livestock producers. So with that, thank you again for watching episode 14. We'll hope to have episode 15 out a little quicker than it was between 13 and 14, and have a great rest of your day.